Hi everybody, welcome back to Jumpstart Code. This next video is going to be an introduction to CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets. HTML is the language that basically sets up the structure and the content of your page, and then to make it pretty, you use styling. And that styling can be applied in your HTML file inside of style tags, but it is more commonly done with a separate file. So I'm going to start off here showing you how to do this. So first of all, I just have a page that I've set up with a few things in it, so I have some content to kind of play around with. I have a title, I have an H1 element, and I have a couple of H2 elements for a second section. I have a couple of paragraphs there, a paragraph here. So just a number of different elements. It'll make it easy for me to demonstrate some different things with CSS. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to set up this external CSS file and link it to your page. So I'm going to do File New, and I'm going to save as, and we're just going to call it styles.css. Very important that you give it the .css extension. The same way it's very important for your HTML page to have the .html extension. All right, so the first thing that we're going to learn about is an element selector in CSS. So if you want to apply something to the entire page, then you can select the body, right? Because if I go back here to my HTML, you'll have to be looking back and forth to understand what you're doing. If I specify the body, then that means that everything that I'm about to specify will affect anything inside the body, which will affect all of the elements that are nested inside of there. Now, CSS is a different language with a different syntax. So you see what I did was I specified the element, which is the body, and then I opened up curly brackets, and you have to make sure that they're closed. This is the indenting style that is most commonly used. And the first thing that I always like to do is to just set up a background color. So there are just numerous properties that you can specify. Nobody learns all these. You look up what you need when you need it, basically. And let's say I do a background color of pink, right? And that's all I want to do to start, because another thing that's very important is to make sure that everything is connected. Now, if I save this and I refresh my page, I don't see pink. That's because I have not connected the styles page to my HTML. So I have to go back over here to my HTML, and here in the head section, I'm going to set up a link, and that is the syntax that we have to use to make this connection. And I need to specify the file name, and the attribute you have to use is href. These are all things that are not always just so obvious. We just have to learn them. And in quotes, the name of the file, styles.css, and then we have to say rel equals style sheet. And link is a tag you'll see that doesn't have a closing tag to it, right? Now, if I save this and refresh the page, I see my background color. If you don't, if you have set up this style with this background and you don't see it, then there's a problem somewhere that you have to check out. So for example, if I misspell background color, I'll just take a letter out of here. Now you notice the minute I do that, I see some red. Red is never good in my editors. It basically means there's a problem. If I go over here and refresh my page, I don't see the color. So this is why I always start with just setting up a background color. If you don't want it to be, such a strong color, then I could just do, antique white. And there are so many ways to specify colors, but for right now in this video, I'm just going to use color names because they're just a lot easier to get started. All right, so now I know that this is connected. All right, what about fonts? Sometimes you would like to change the font that is on your page. If you want to affect everything on your page, then again, I can use body. And the property is font family. And there are, again, so many ways to specify fonts, but these are some built-in options. And I'm just going to use cursive here. And if I save it, so you really need to get into the habit of change one thing and then make sure that it's right. Make sure you understand the cause and effect of everything that you do. All right. Now, let's go into just a little bit more here. So you see that I've got these different header elements, these different paragraph elements. So suppose I want to make the color, the text color of all of my paragraphs to be something, right? So I can come over here and add a new bit of styling. So I want to affect all of my paragraphs. So I use the P selector, and you'll have to remember when you want the background color, that's the property. When you do just color, that is going to be your text color. So let's say I say green. All right. So we'll now see that we have changed the color of all of the paragraphs to be green. The other color, the other things that were not paragraphs were not affected, right? Let's look at now. Suppose I want to change this this first paragraph. I want it to be a different color from all of the other paragraphs. So that means I have to have some kind of a way to uniquely specify this particular paragraph. We can use an ID to do that. So if I go in here, this is this first paragraph, I can add to it ID equals, let's just call it P1. So an ID is a way to uniquely identify one single element, and it allows me to then be able to style that one element. So let's go over here to my styles. So the P there is going to represent all paragraphs, but since I have an ID called P1, if I do hashtag P1, then I can change the color of that paragraph, let's say to be red, right? And if you want to put comments in your CSS file, again, this is different syntax. A comment in here is /*. You write your comment and it ends with //. So I'm going to say use hashtag to specify, to reference an ID. So now we'll see that I've said to make all the paragraphs green, but the one that has an ID of P1, that particular rule gets superseded and that particular paragraph is now red. So this is a way that you can make changes to some unique element. Sometimes you want to do something to multiple elements that might be different. So we can use something called a class. So suppose I want this heading. I'm going to say class equals blue. And I'm going to, no, let's not do the heading. I'm going to change what I'm going to do. Let's say that I'm going to specify a class on my H2 here, class equals blue, and maybe this paragraph, class equals blue. Now again, these ID names, you can make these up. They can be any set of identifiers, letters, and numbers. They cannot start with a number. So if I want this header and this paragraph to be blue, since they are two different types of elements, I need another way to select them both. So I give them both the same class. If I go over here now, so to refer to a class, I use dot to reference a class. And so I will say dot blue, and I want this to be color blue. Right? So you see here that I've said make all the paragraphs green, except this one was red because it has an ID on it, and this one is blue because it has a class on it, and this second header also is blue because it has a class on it. So that's the very beginnings of understanding a little bit about CSS and selectors. We've looked at element selectors, we've looked at how to use an ID, how to use a class, and here we've only been playing around with colors, but we will play around with some other properties in future videos.